The morning Marcus Reeves drove up to Harlow Industrial Park, the sky was the color of cold steel, and the air smelled like diesel and ambition. Two things he had always understood far better than the men who underestimated him. He parked his decade-old pickup truck beside a row of gleaming executive vehicles, their polished hoods, reflecting the pale October light like mirrors held up to everything he was not, at least not yet. He stepped out, adjusted the collar of his work jacket, and looked up at the enormous sign, bolted above the entrance of Harlow Precision Manufacturing. Bold black letters, freshly painted, the kind of sign that cost more than most people's first cars. He had seen that sign in photographs 100 times. He had studied it the way a general studies a fortress before laying siege. Today was not the siege. Today was reconnaissance. Today Marcus Reeves was simply here to pitch. He was 31 years old, and for the past 4 years he had been running a one-man precision machining operation out of a rented garage on the east side of Denton, a mid-sized industrial city that had seen better decades. The garage was 800 square feet. It had one CNC lathe, one milling machine he had rebuilt from salvaged parts, second-hand inspection table, and a folding chair where he sometimes slept when deadlines chased him past midnight. He had no investors, no business partner, no receptionist, no company car. What he had was a name, Reeves Precision Works, printed on business cards he had designed himself, and a portfolio of custom aerospace-grade components, so flawlessly machined that two of the largest aerospace suppliers in the region had quietly started routing certain specialty orders his way, off the books, because their own floor shops couldn't hold the tolerances he could. Marcus wasn't here to beg. He was here to propose a subcontracting arrangement that would benefit both sides. Harlow Precision was drowning in backlogged orders. He had read it in the trade press, confirmed it through 3 separate supply chain contacts, and verified it by looking at their job board, which had posted 11 machinist positions in the past 40 days. They had capacity problems. He had solutions. He had prepared a 12-page proposal with part drawings, tolerance certifications, lead times, and pricing structured to make the offer impossible to refuse on paper. He had rehearsed his pitch until it was clean and direct, no filler, no fluff, just the kind of language that spoke directly to a manufacturing executive's bottom line. He checked in at the front desk, was handed a visitor badge, and was told that Mr. Gerald Harlow, founder and CEO of Harlow Precision Manufacturing, would see him in 15 minutes. Marcus sat down in the lobby, his proposal folder on his knee, and watched the floor. He watched the way the machinists moved through the glass-walled shop beyond the reception area. Their pace, their posture, the small cues that told an experienced operator exactly how a floor was being run. What he saw confirmed everything his research had told him. Good equipment, mid-tier operators, supervision that was running too thin across too many concurrent jobs. They needed relief. He could be that relief. Gerald Harlow came out 22 minutes after the appointed time, which Marcus noted without emotion. The man was 63, broad in the shoulders with the softness that comes from 20 years of letting other people do the physical work, wearing a pressed blue Oxford shirt, and the kind of loafers that cost what Marcus paid in rent. He had the manner of a man who had built something substantial, and had spent the last decade enjoying the fact that he had built it. He did not offer a particularly warm handshake. He looked at Marcus with the comfortable, half-focused attention of someone who had already pre-decided that this meeting would not take long. They walked to a conference room. Marcus opened his folder. He began to speak. He was 3 sentences into his proposal when Harlow leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and tilted his chin upward with a small, quiet smile. The kind of smile that isn't really a smile at all but a signal, a dismissal dressed in pleasantry. Marcus kept speaking, because he had earned the right to finish his sentences, and he intended to exercise that right. He walked Harlow through the tolerances, through the certification records, through the pricing model. He was precise. He was brief. He was persuasive. When he finished, he set the proposal on the table and slid it across. Harlow glanced at it, the way you glance at a menu at a restaurant you've already decided to leave. Then he looked up and he said, almost gently, almost kindly, in the tone a man uses when he wants his condescension to land like wisdom, "Son, I appreciate the hustle, I really do, but you're operating out of an 800 square foot garage with one machine. We're running 40 CNC units on 2 shifts. I don't subcontract to hobby shops. It's nothing personal." He paused, and then he laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, it was almost worse. It was a comfortable laugh. The laugh of a man who found the situation mildly amusing in the way that a large dog finds a small dog mildly amusing. "Come back when you have a factory," he said, and stood up. Marcus picked up his proposal folder. He stood. He looked at Gerald Harlow for exactly 2 seconds. Long enough to see the man clearly, not long enough to give him anything, and he said quietly, "I'll do that." Then he walked out. He sat in his truck for 4 minutes in the Harlow parking lot before he started the engine. He did not allow himself anger, not yet, not here. Anger was fuel, and fuel needed to be stored, not burned in parking lots. He had known this might happen. He had prepared for this outcome the way a surgeon prepares for complications, not hoping for them, but refusing to be undone by them if they arrived. What he had not fully prepared for was the laugh. That specific laugh. He replayed it twice on the drive home, feeling it the way you feel a splinter. Small but precise and impossible to ignore. By the time he pulled into his garage on Kellner Street, the anger had already begun to transform into something colder and more useful. He unlocked the roll-up door, stepped inside, flicked on the fluorescent lights, and stood in the center of his 800 square feet. The CNC lathe hummed faintly in the residual warmth of the morning's run. The inspection table was laid with a row of titanium bushings he had finished the night before, waiting for a final measurement pass. The smell was what it always was: coolant, metal, clean machine oil, and the faint ghost of his own exhaustion. He looked around at every corner of this place that Harlow had called a hobby shop, and he felt something clarify inside him, the way metal clarifies when it's properly tempered. Harder, more precise, stripped of everything that doesn't serve the purpose. He picked up his phone and called his accountant, a woman named Diane Cho, who had been managing his books since year 1, and who had a gift for telling him difficult financial truths without making him feel like he was drowning. He told her what happened. Then he said, "I need to know exactly how much I can borrow against the receivables and the equipment, and I need to know it by tonight." Diane was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Marcus, you have $32,000 in certified receivables. The lathe and mill together might get you 45 on a hard asset loan, and your credit score is 741. If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you're going to need a lot more than that." He said, "I know. Tell me the number," she told him. He wrote it down. Then he spent the rest of the afternoon making other calls. The network he had built over 4 years was small but dense with loyalty. There was Ray Okonkwo, a master machinist, who had trained Marcus 8 years ago at a regional technical college, and who had been quietly miserable at his current employer for the past 18 months. There was Priya Sandhu, a process engineer with a 6 Sigma black belt, and an unmatched ability to optimize machine cycle times, who had left a large manufacturer the previous spring after a promotion she had earned 3 consecutive times was given to someone else. There were 2 other skilled machinists from his professional network who had expressed interest in different capacities over the years. And there was Tom Beller, a commercial real estate broker who owed Marcus a favor going back to a subcontracting job. Marcus had done at cost when Tom's family business had been in a desperate bind. By 7 o'clock that evening, Marcus had made 14 calls. By 9, he had 3 verbal commitments from people willing to come on board, contingent on him securing the space and the equipment. By 11, Tom Beller had sent him 3 available industrial lease listings in Denton's manufacturing corridor, one of which was a 12,000 square foot facility that had been vacant for 8 months and whose landlord was aggressively motivated. Marcus read the listing 3 times. He pulled up the satellite view of the address. He looked at the building's dimensions, the loading dock configuration, the power capacity listed in the property sheet. Then he opened a new document and began writing a business plan that he would not sleep until he had finished. The laugh was still in his head. He used it the way a runner uses a headwind, not to slow down, but to push against, to build strength in the resistance. Gerald Harlow had laughed because he believed the distance between Marcus's garage and his factory was too large to be crossed by someone like Marcus. In a time frame that mattered, Harlow had done the math of other men's ambitions, using the timid arithmetic of low expectation. Marcus was about to show him a different kind of math, the kind that compounds fast when the variables are right, when the hunger is real, and when the man doing the calculating has something to prove that goes beyond money. He finished the business plan at 3:47 in the morning. He read it back to himself once. It was good. It was more than good. It was the kind of plan that had the structural integrity of something, built by a person who had spent 4 years learning every way a small manufacturing business could fail, and had designed around every single one of those failure points with ruthless specificity. He saved the file, closed his laptop, lay down on the cot he kept in the back of the garage for long nights, and stared at the ceiling in the dark for exactly 11 minutes before he closed his eyes and slept. 90 days from now, he thought, as sleep came for him. 90 days from now. Day 1 of the 90 began at 5 in the morning, when Marcus signed the lease on the 12,000 square foot facility at 4400 Commerce Drive. The landlord, a tired man named Whitfield, who had been bleeding carrying costs on the property for the better part of a year, did not haggle excessively. Tom Beller had negotiated a 60-day rent-free period on the front end in exchange for a clean 3-year commitment and a modest security deposit, and Whitfield had agreed because an occupied building that cost him nothing, for 2 months, was categorically better than an empty one that cost him everything. Marcus shook hands, accepted the keys, and drove to the property alone in the early gray light of a Tuesday morning. He stood inside the empty building for a long time. The space was cavernous and cold, smelling of concrete dust and old industrial grease, lit by overhead fluorescents that flickered at one end. The concrete floor was in decent condition. The 3-phase electrical service was rated at 400 amps. There was a loading dock with 2 bay doors. There was an office suite at the front, 4 rooms, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. There was nothing else, which meant there was room for everything. Marcus walked the floor in a methodical grid, heel to toe, counting paces, measuring the space in his body the way a craftsman measures with his hands. He was imagining machine placement, workflow routing, inspection staging areas, raw material storage. He was building the factory in his mind before the first bolt was set. Financing had come together in the 10 days. Following his meeting with Harlow, assembled from sources that required ingenuity more than money. The hard asset loan against his existing equipment had come through at $41,000. A certified receivables line with his bank had provided another $28,000. A private equipment leasing company that specialized in manufacturing startups had agreed to finance 3 refurbished CNC machining centers, 2 vertical mills and 1 turning center, on a 60-month lease with a deferred first payment. Priya Sandhu, who understood capital equipment economics as well as she understood machining, had helped him select machines with the best combination of capability, reliability, and lease cost. Ray Okonkwo had sourced an additional used lathe through his network that was purchased outright for $11,000 in cash, cutting and sharp, a machine with 10 years of useful life left in it easily. By day 8, the machines were delivered and positioned according to the floor plan. Marcus had drawn and redrawn 6 times until the workflow moved like water, raw stock in, finished components out, with the inspection station centrally located so that every machine fed into it with minimal travel distance. Priya had designed the process routing documentation before the machines were even bolted down, so that on the day the first part ran, the shop would operate not like a startup feeling its way in the dark, but like a facility that had been running for a year. Ray had arrived on day 5 and had not stopped moving since. The 2 additional machinists, a man named Cole Briggs and a woman named Anita Ferris, both came with CNC certifications and the kind of professional seriousness that Marcus had specifically selected for. By day 12, all 4 machines were running. All 4 operators were on the floor. Priya was walking the process with a stopwatch and a notepad, and Marcus was on his phone every waking hour that wasn't spent machining, selling, because the machines meant nothing without the orders, and the orders required trust, and trust, in manufacturing supply chains required proof. He called every contact he had cultivated over 4 years. He sent cold emails with his new company profile, his certifications, his dimensional inspection reports, his delivery performance history. He called his 2 quiet aerospace clients and told them, directly, that Reeves Precision Works had expanded to a 12,000 square foot facility with full CNC capability, and was now able to take on contract volumes it could not previously accommodate. Both of them responded within 48 hours. One placed a trial order for 500 precision housings with a 3-week lead time. The other requested a quote for an ongoing blanket order, The kind of order that doesn't just fill a shop, it builds one. By day 22, the shop was running 2 shifts. By day 30, Marcus had hired 2 more operators. By day 35, the first aerospace trial order had shipped on time and within tolerance, and the quality report that came back from the customer's receiving inspection contained a single line that Marcus read 4 times. All characteristics within specification. 0 rejections. Approved for ongoing supply. He taped it to the wall above his desk. It was the first thing he saw every morning when he sat down, and it said everything that needed to be said about the quality of what he had built in 35 days from an empty concrete floor. It was on day 47 that Marcus first heard about Harlow Precision's troubles, not through gossip, not through Schadenfreude, but through the same trade contacts and supply chain intelligence that had originally led him to Gerald Harlow's door. The information arrived in a phone call from a sourcing manager at a regional defense contractor, a man named Dennis Park, who had been one of Harlow's primary customers, and who was now experiencing the specific, expensive misery of a key supplier who had missed 3 consecutive delivery commitments on a contract with government-mandated schedule requirements. Dennis was not calling Marcus to commiserate. Dennis was calling Marcus because he needed parts, and he needed them on time, and he had heard from 2 separate sources in the past week that Reeves Precision Works had stood up a serious shop on Commerce Drive and had just delivered a flawless aerospace run. Marcus listened to Dennis describe the parts. They were medium complexity, turning components, aerospace-grade aluminum, tight bore tolerances, finished requirements that were demanding, but within the range of what his shop could handle cleanly. The quantities were substantial. The pricing Dennis described was what Harlow had been charging, which was fair market and profitable at Marcus's cost structure. He told Dennis he needed 48 hours to review the drawings and confirm capacity. Dennis said he needed an answer in 36. Marcus said he would have one in 24. He called Priya into the office, closed the door and spread the RFQ documentation across the desk. They went through it together, Priya on the process side, Marcus on the business side, and by midnight, they had a clear picture. They could run it, they could hit the schedule, and the margin was strong. Marcus sent Dennis a quote at 6 a.m. the next morning. By 9 a.m., Dennis had accepted. It was the largest single order Reeves Precision Works had ever received, and it had come directly to Marcus because Harlow had failed to deliver it. What Marcus didn't know, what he discovered over the following 2 weeks, through the natural flow of information in a manufacturing ecosystem, where everyone knows everyone, was that Harlow's delivery failures were not isolated incidents. They were symptoms. Gerald Harlow had over-leveraged his business in the previous 18 months, chasing growth through capital equipment purchases. He had financed on terms that assumed a revenue trajectory that hadn't materialized. His floor was running at reduced efficiency because 3 of his most experienced machinists had left for better-paying shops, and his hiring efforts had brought in bodies but not talent. His quality reject rates had quietly crept up, triggering customer chargebacks that were eating into margins already compressed by the debt service. His bank had tightened his line of credit, which meant he was managing cash flow on a razor's edge. The kind of edge where one bad month cuts deep. Marcus processed all of this information with the careful, unemotional attention of a surgeon reviewing a patient's chart. He was not gloating, he had no time for that, and more importantly, no interest in it. What he was doing was assessing a strategic situation with the same ruthless clarity he brought to everything else. Harlow Precision Manufacturing was a company in distress. It had real assets, 40-plus CNC machines, established customer relationships, an ISO certification, 60,000 square feet of manufacturing space, and a workforce of approximately 80 people who needed someone competent to lead them. It had one serious liability. The man whose name was above the door had run out of road. By day 61, Marcus was meeting with a business acquisition attorney named Sylvia Tran, who had been referred to him by Diane Cho. By day 67, Sylvia had helped him structure an approach. They were not talking about a hostile acquisition. There was nothing hostile about it on Marcus's end. They were talking about a distressed business purchase, the kind that happens when a motivated seller meets a prepared buyer, and both parties understand that the alternative to a deal is something worse for everyone involved. Marcus did not call Harlow himself. Sylvia reached out through appropriate channels to Harlow's attorney, framing the inquiry professionally and without sentiment. What happened next took 12 days. Harlow's attorney came back with questions. Sylvia answered them. Harlow came back with a number, high, prideful, the number of a man who still believed his name was worth more than his balance sheet. Marcus countered with a number, grounded in verified asset valuation, outstanding debt obligations, and the realistic fair market value of a manufacturing business with degraded customer relationships and a cash flow problem. It was not a low ball, it was accurate, and accuracy in a negotiation is its own kind of power, because it cannot be argued with, only resented. Harlow resented it. Then he accepted a modified version of it, because his bank had called in the same week and presented him with a timeline that made Marcus's offer look generous by comparison. On day 89, Marcus Reeves sat in a lawyer's conference room in downtown Denton, across from Gerald Harlow and a table full of documents. Harlow looked older than he had in October, in the way that men age when the weight they've been carrying finally settles visibly on them. He did not look broken. He was too much of a builder for that. But he looked tired, and he looked for the first time uncertain. Marcus looked at him the way he had looked at him in that conference room 90 days ago. Steady and direct, and then he looked away, because this was not the moment for anything personal. This was a business transaction, and he intended to execute it with professionalism. The documents were signed in order, initialed where required, witnessed, notarized. Harlow stood when it was done, and he extended his hand, and Marcus shook it. There was a long moment in which neither of them said anything, and the silence had weight. The weight of the 800-square-foot garage, the weight of the laugh, the weight of every midnight hour and every cold morning and every precise cut made in quiet fury. And then Harlow said, simply, "You built something real." His voice was even, and whatever else it was not small. Marcus held his gaze for a moment and said, "So did you. I intend to keep it that way." Then he picked up his copy of the documents and walked out of the conference room into the hallway, where Priya, Ray, Sylvia, and Diane were waiting for him. On day 90, Marcus drove to 4400 Commerce Drive and parked his truck in the lot. He sat for a moment and looked at his building, his 12,000-square-foot facility, his machines, his team, his first and still growing empire. Then he drove to the sign company he had quietly contacted 3 weeks before and confirmed the order he had placed. Then the order he had placed in the same spirit in which he had done everything else, with complete certainty that he would need it. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, a new sign was being installed above the entrance of the building formerly known as Harlow Precision Manufacturing. The letters were clean, bold, and freshly made. They read, "Reeves Precision's Works, Denton Division," not a replacement of what had been built. A continuation of it, under new direction, under new purpose, under the name of the man who had once been laughed at in a parking lot for operating out of a garage, and who had decided in the quiet of that pickup truck that the only acceptable response to that laugh was a legacy. He stood outside in the cold October air, the same cold, the same steel-colored sky as 90 days before, and he looked at his name above the door of a factory he now owned, and he felt nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. What he felt was something quieter and more permanent, the specific satisfaction of a man who has done exactly what he said he was going to do, exactly when he said he was going to do it, by the precise application of skill, will, and the kind of fury that builds things instead of burning them down. He turned up the collar of his work jacket, walked through the front door, and got back to work.